Hello and welcome to the Tempo Conference. My name is Scott Price from the University of South Carolina, and I just want to thank you all so much for stopping by and for spending some of your precious time with me and learning how students with autism may need to approach the reading process and the counting process just a little bit differently than our traditional students. I am fortunate enough and truly humbled to have been able to teach a lot of young people with autism and other unique learning challenges for the past 25 years, whether that was students with autism, ADHD, vision and hearing impairments, dyslexia, Down syndrome, and any other unique needs. And I say that I'm humbled and privileged simply because they have taught me so much about the educational process and what in my own teaching has been irrelevant, meaningless, and counterproductive over the years. And they've helped me make that now more meaningful, productive, and relevant for many, many students, whether they have unique learning challenges or not. And I feel like these brilliant, brilliant young people who are wonderful teachers in their own right have just helped me to become a better teacher, a better pianist, and hopefully a better person as well. I truly believe that our students are just genius pedagogues, and I know that every time they come into my studio and sit down on the bench, I'm going to get a master lesson in pedagogy. They really are the teachers, I'm the student. Of course, I don't tell them that, but they are just such gifted teachers in their own right. So today, what I'd like to share with you are just some ways that my students have shown me that I need to change my teaching to meet their needs when they're learning how to read and when they're learning how to count. And what that basically means is that I need to be very careful of my process and work in a step-by-step way and with a step-by-step breakdown. I also need to be very careful of my vocabulary, and I also need to be very careful in my communication. So we'll see what all of that means as we go along. But just to recap, the step-by-step process is a lot different for my students with autism. One example that I like to give is if we are teaching a student how to play the group of 2 black keys in their traditional student, we may just say something like, okay, let's learn how to play a group of 2 black keys. Can you look at the middle of the keyboard? You see that group of 2 black keys? Can you take your right hand 2 and 3? And can you play those for me? That was great. Now, can you watch me do it? Because I'm going to show you how to shape your hand and your fingers. So can you watch me do it? Now, can you do it and can you use that same hand shape? Pretty good. Now, can you move around the keyboard and just start playing those groups of black keys? And if you want to, use your left hand 2 and 3 as well. That works for a traditional student. But there are about a dozen places where that could have blown up if I was working with a student with autism who needs a step-by-step process. And what I mean by that is, with a traditional student, I assumed that I had joint attention. I assumed that I had consent. I assumed that my student knew the vocabulary that I was going to use. I assumed that they knew their colors. I assumed that they could count and identify a group of 2 black keys. It's a pretty high-level abstract concept. I assumed that they knew their right hand label. I assumed they knew their finger number labels. I assumed that they had the fine motor skills to be able to play 2 keys at once at the same time. I assumed that they could attend to my model. I assumed they had the fine motor skills to copy my model. I assumed they could refocus their attention. And I assumed that they could play those group of 2 black keys and then transfer that skill to another group of black keys on the keyboard. I assumed that they understood everything, and then I assumed that they could go home and practice it on their own. So that's about 15 places where that lesson segment could have just blown up for a student. So for a student with autism, I may need to say, hello, can you look at me? Can we talk about playing a group of 2 black keys today? Very good, or maybe just even 1 black key. So this is your right hand. This is your finger number 2. This is a black key on the piano. Can you take your right hand, finger number 2, can you touch that key, push it down and make a sound? Great job. You just played a black key with your right hand, finger number 2. Can you do it again? Excellent job. Can you find a different black key, and can you play it with your right hand finger number 2? So that's the step-by-step breakdown that one of my students with autism will need to be able to approach a skill. And that's similar to what I'd like to talk about today in talking about music reading and music counting, is that we need to break down the process into a step-by-step learning situation and a step-by-step learning format, chain small bits of information together, and never make assumptions. We also need to remove layers of abstraction which may be meaningless, irrelevant, and counterproductive for our students in favor of a process that they can understand very easily from a literal and specific mindset. So let's talk a little bit about the music reading process. For my students with autism, I like to differentiate in my own teaching between 2 things. One I like to call note reading, and one I like to call music reading. And for the note reading process, that's something that we can do away from the piano. That's where we look at a piece of music and we talk about the clefs and we identify the notes, start to recognize patterns within the notes, whether those are melodic passages or chords and chord progressions. We talk about the meter and the rhythm and the structure of the composition, and that leads to a deeper understanding of the musical content and hopefully to a greater depth in the performance of the musical content. That's all crucial. It's very, very important. I would never say that it isn't. But that is a very intellectual and abstract exercise that some of my students with autism just can't approach. Or perhaps they can't understand it intellectually, or perhaps they can't do it physically through written examples. Perhaps they don't understand why we're doing that in a lesson, or they don't understand the relationship between that exercise and what they're doing at the keyboard. So for my students with autism, I like to use a process that we call music reading in my studio. And that is a process of see that dot, use this finger, play that key, and hold it down for a certain duration of time. That way it is literally see, do, and chaining those events into a longer progression of musical sounds. Now that doesn't mean that they aren't getting music theory or they're getting a deeper understanding of the music. They're just approaching it through oral acculturation and through the acquisition of sound patterns that they then equate with black and white key patterns that they need to touch in a succession of sounds to make the music happen. And they can show me that they understand that by improvising and by playing expressively at the keyboard and demonstrating some self-sufficiency. So they're still learning all of those greater abstract concepts, they're just doing it in a different way, which applies directly to what they're doing at the keyboard. So let's see an example of how I break down that process for a student. So this young man's name is Stanton. He's about 7 or 8 when this video was taken. And for Stanton, first I have to get joint attention. Then I need to get his consent to do the exercise, because if he gives me his consent, he's inviting me into his world and telling me that he's ready to go and that he's eager to learn. If I don't get that consent and I start to force things on him, that can cause anxiety and frustration and a series of behavioral outbursts or behavioral shutdowns of varying levels of, upset. So with Stanton, I get joint attention and then I get consent. And then we define a small bit of the music that we're going to learn. And then I close the fall board. We work on finger numbers. And then we work on key names or note names. Sometimes we use those interchangeably depending on what the student needs. Then I give a model, and then Stanton replicates that model, and then we move to the next bit of music, and then we chain those things together. So you'll see me at work with Stanton doing all those things. And then another thing that I do with Stanton is what I like to call working in the process. And what that means is that I am there with him every second of the way, helping him physically to find the keys that he needs and how to play them, pointing out letter names that are coming next, and trying to head off any problems that might be arising before they actually happen. I'm also validating and celebrating everything that he does correctly. Even if he makes a mistake, I still celebrate it because he tried, and trying is huge. Piano playing and learning is just fraught with unknowns that can be very scary for students. And so even if they try to do it, that's a huge win in my book. We just smile and say, hey, you tried, let's do it again. And maybe you can change it a little bit this way. And that way it takes any shame or guilt out of the process, or any sense of fear of being wrong about things. And I often have to remind them that, hey, even I have to try every day, and we try to get a little bit better. So that's a little different process than a traditional student who we don't work with them in the process. We tend to set them a task, leave their personal space, let them do the task, and then we re-enter their personal space and begin our assessment and instruction. So Stanton's a wonderful young man who is about level 2 or level 3 on the autism spectrum. He has speech delays, he has intellectual delays, he also has some behavioral challenges, and he has some fine and gross motor skill challenges as well. But he's a brilliant young man, and he always tries his best, and you'll see him working so hard in this video clip. We work on as one on.
Yeah.
Yeah. No? Yes?
Yeah.
Yeah, good, good. You had to work on lines 1 and 2. Let's do line 1. Finger movements. You ready? 1, 2, ready. Go. 5, 1, 2, 3, 5, 3, 1, 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 3, 1 and 4. Again. Ready? Go. 5, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 3, 1, 2, 1 and 2, 1, 3, 1 and 4. No names. Ready?
Yeah.
D, A, D, E, F, A, F, E, G and A, F and A, E and A. My turn. Where's your right hand? Where's your right hand?
Oh, come on.
Are you ready? 1, 2, 3, go. So he's just great. You can see him getting better and better as we go through the exercise. And you may also be observing that and saying, well, that's not music reading or note reading, that's just rote learning. And to a certain percentage, yes, it is rote learning. But the point of it is that over a longer period of time, this becomes self-sufficient music reading for Stanton. He gets better and better and rises within the process over a longer period of time than it might take a traditional beginner. But that's how we help him be successful. And he is now in, I think it's the Royal Conservatory Celebration Series Level 4, and he does some composing and he improvises, and he's even played some elementary piano concertos as well. So he's 25 now. comes every Tuesday evening for a piano lesson, and I think my world would just fall apart if he stopped studying, because he's just become such a great friend to me. So that's just an example of how some of the music reading process is different from my students with autism, and how we reframe traditional pedagogy to make that work. Now let's move on to music counting. This next student is Margaret. Margaret was born 3 months premature. She is very nearly blind. She has autistic tendencies. She also has developmental delays which affect her intellectual development, also her speech, and her fine and gross motor skills as well. But again, she's a brilliant teacher. And for Margaret, a traditional counting approach, whether it's numeric or syllabic or any other counting approach, just doesn't have much meaning for her. It's a layer cake of abstractions which she may get frustrated with, or she may not understand the relationship between that counting approach and what she's doing at the keyboard. So we don't use it. Instead, I like to use what I call directive words. And these are a series of words that tell her exactly what to do with her body to realize the rhythm and sound at the keyboard. And an example of this is if we use a quarter-quarter half note pattern instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 1, 1, 2, or ta, 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 ah. Instead, we use those directive words, which are play, 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 hold, or touch, 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 hold. Or if your student might need a key name, it could be C, D, E, hold, or finger numbers 2, 3, 4, hold. It's still counting. They're still learning that proportional exercise of how long to touch keys to create rhythm at the keyboard. It just happens with a less of a layer of abstraction that they may not be able to approach. Now with Margaret, you'll see me working in the process with her, and because she's blind, I'm also doing a lot of hand-over-hand work with her as well, some singing as a form of nonverbal pedagogy, and then you'll see her working through this piece and beginning to realize where she needs to hold notes longer than in some other places.
Bell, bashful butterfly.
Can you play it again? Remember to hold your notes, please.
Yes.
Both hands ready.
Your turn.
Are you ready? There, now you're ready.
Now your turn. Butterfly.
So will you remember to hold your notes?
Yes.
So she's just a brilliant personality and a brilliant teacher in her own right. I'd like to show you one more video clip. And this is a young man who has autism. He also has some behavioral challenges, some fine and gross motor skill delays, and he has some pretty pronounced ADHD issues. So this young man's name is Jonathan, and he reads pretty well. It's just the ADHD is something that we need to manage throughout the lesson for him to be successful in his reading process. So when you look at the video, one of the first things you're going to see is that the top of the grand piano is closed and the music desk is on top, because if Jonathan sees one hammer or one damper moving, that lesson is over, and that's all he's going to want to look at for the rest of the half hour. So we eliminate the distractions for Jonathan. I also have to make sure that I get joint attention and consent from him. And I need to remember that he's not misbehaving. He just has challenges in staying focused. And so I always need to remember to be patient and compassionate and kind, and to use what I like to call the perpetual smile, which is the warm facial expressions, the open eyes, the warm body language, the warm voice tone, and just constantly redirect his attention, because that's what he needs. It's not about me, it's about what he needs during the lesson. So he needs those things. And you're also going to see that I constantly cover up the music as he goes. That's because if Jonathan makes a mistake, he wants to go right back to the beginning of the piece. So I cover up the music so that he can't go back and he has to keep going. Since things in his peripheral vision will draw his attention away, I also move my fingers to constantly keep his eyes focused on the music. And then when we play, there are some times where he's not quite sure what key to play. Now, for me to stop the process and work on key names for Jonathan could have been frustrating, or it's something that he may not have understood the relationship with, or he could have thought that he was doing bad in the lesson, which he wasn't. And so for Jonathan, what I need is some good old nonverbal pedagogy. I just sing the pitch or hum the pitch, and you'll see him find the correct key that he needs. He's just a brilliant young man, and it's just a joy to watch him succeed through all of his challenges. All right, Jonathan, looking, water lily, can you find your keys? You are right here and right here. Are you ready? You need your hands here and your hands here. Are you ready? 1, 2, ready, go. Oh, Jonathan, 2 black keys. Ready, go.
1, 2, ready, go.
Duet, and can you stay steady? 1, 2, ready, So he's a big success. And we do a lot of celebration again in my office, because if they tried, that's good enough for me. And Jonathan's lesson segment there was not so much about the reading process, but about how sometimes we have to manage several layers of things all at once, and that for him it's the behavioral process that he needed the most attention on, as well as me facilitating his reading process and the playing of the duet as well. But he's just a wonderful young man, and I miss him. He doesn't study with me anymore, because many of my students, they come and go, just like traditional students, and they need to work on other things in their lives. But while he was with me, he was just such a joy to teach. So that's just a little window into how traditional pedagogy needs to change a little bit to meet the needs of students with autism. Sometimes we just have to remove the layers of abstraction and simplify the process. And just because we do that doesn't mean we're sacrificing quality or depth in the learning. Not at all. It's just the information is approached in a different way, and it's absorbed in a different way. And I know some of you are looking at the students as they play and thinking, wow, how does this guy teach college pedagogy? How does he teach graduate performance majors? Look at those kids. Look at their hand positions. Look at their finger positions, their wrist positions. Yeah, it's not great sometimes. But please remember, all of these students have fine and gross motor skill delays, and sometimes that's the best that they can do. So we need to be compassionate and kind and make concessions or compromises sometimes, or just learn that that's what they need to do with their bodies to have success in the lesson situation. And that perhaps over a longer period of time, a lot of those habits improve just with careful monitoring and repetition and reminders. So thank you for spending some time with me today. I know your time is precious, but I appreciate you all very much. And for those of you working with students with autism and other unique challenges or unique abilities, I applaud you for your work. I'm so thankful for you and your work. And please don't be afraid. I know sometimes it's easy to panic when something goes wrong in this situation, but there's always another try. There's always another day. There's always another week. And you're all heroes for doing the work. So I hope you have a great conference, and I hope to see you in person sometime in the future. Thank you so much.